What if you inherited more than just money and property from a dead relative? What if you inherited their memories, their personality, their unfinished business, their deepest fears and desires, and slowly realized you were becoming them, losing yourself piece by piece until you couldn't remember who you used to be? Have you ever found yourself doing something completely out of character and thought, "This isn't like me at all"? Ever caught yourself using phrases you've never used before, developing preferences for foods you used to hate, or having strong opinions about subjects you'd never cared about? What if that wasn't personal growth or change? What if that was someone else slowly taking over your identity? If you're brave enough to discover what you might inherit from the dead, hit that like button now. This story will make you question whether you're still yourself, or gradually becoming someone else entirely without realizing it. This is about Marcus Reed, who inherited his great-uncle's house and received far more than he bargained for. Marcus barely knew his great-uncle Vincent. They'd met perhaps 3 times at family gatherings over the years. Brief interactions at weddings and funerals, where Vincent appeared as an eccentric older relative who lived alone and seemed to exist on the periphery of family life. Vincent was known in the family as a brilliant but strange man. He'd been a surgeon in his younger years, then a world traveler, then a collector of antiques and historical artifacts. He lived alone in an imposing Victorian house in Salem, Massachusetts, and rarely spoke to relatives except for obligatory holiday cards. When Vincent died unexpectedly of a heart attack at age 78, Marcus was genuinely surprised to learn that he was Vincent's sole heir. The lawyer explained that Vincent had been specific in his will. The house, all its contents, and a considerable financial estate would go to Marcus, with the single condition that Marcus live in the house for at least 1 full year. Marcus was 28 years old, working a dead-end job in Boston, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment. The inheritance seemed like a miracle: financial freedom and a beautiful historic home. He quit his job and moved into Vincent's house immediately, planning to spend the required year getting the property ready for sale. The Victorian house was extraordinary. 3 stories of ornate architecture filled with Vincent's eclectic collections. There were rooms devoted to antique medical instruments, walls lined with books in multiple languages, cabinets filled with archaeological artifacts from around the world, and photography collections documenting Vincent's extensive travels. Marcus spent his first weeks exploring the house and sorting through Vincent's belongings. He was fascinated by his great-uncle's journals, which detailed Vincent's experiences as a surgeon, his archaeological expeditions, his studies of ancient history and comparative religion. Vincent had been far more accomplished and interesting than Marcus had ever realized. Marcus found himself staying up late into the night reading Vincent's detailed accounts of performing complex surgeries, exploring ancient ruins in Egypt and Peru, and engaging in scholarly debates with academics from universities around the world. Vincent's life had been filled with purpose, adventure, and intellectual achievement. That's when Marcus began to notice changes in himself. He developed a sudden craving for coffee with brandy, a drink he'd never enjoyed before, but which Vincent mentioned loving in his journals. Marcus started using British expressions and formal speech patterns that he'd picked up from Vincent's writing style. If you're starting to feel uneasy about the idea of inheriting someone else's personality, smash that subscribe button. Because Marcus's transformation was just beginning, and what happened to him will make you question the nature of identity itself. Marcus began organizing his belongings the way Vincent had arranged his possessions. He found himself drawn to Vincent's preferred areas of the house: the library for morning reading, the study for evening reflection, the conservatory for afternoon tea. He even started dressing more formally, wearing Vincent's tailored clothes that fit him perfectly despite their different builds. The changes accelerated rapidly. Marcus discovered that he had knowledge he'd never learned. He could identify rare medical conditions from symptoms described in books he'd never read. He knew historical facts about archaeological sites he'd never visited. He could play chess at an expert level despite never having seriously studied the game. Marcus started having dreams that weren't his own. Vivid, detailed dreams of performing delicate surgical procedures, exploring ancient tombs in exotic locations, having intense intellectual conversations with people he'd never met. These weren't random dreams. They were Vincent's memories, experienced as if Marcus had lived them himself. Concerned about these changes, Marcus researched his family history more thoroughly. What he discovered in old family documents, newspaper clippings, and genealogical records terrified him. Vincent hadn't been the first owner of the house to undergo such a transformation. The Victorian house had been passed down through their family for 5 generations. Each owner had mysteriously developed the same refined interests, the same scholarly pursuits, the same distinctive mannerisms, and even the same elegant handwriting style as the previous owner. The transformation was so complete that family members would comment on how much each new owner resembled their predecessor. Marcus realized that the house wasn't just filled with Vincent's belongings and memories. It was saturated with Vincent's essential being. Every object, every room, every photograph contained traces of Vincent's personality and experiences. Living in the space was gradually overwriting Marcus's identity with Vincent's accumulated consciousness. Marcus attempted to leave the house, to break free from its influence before the transformation became irreversible. But he found that he couldn't bring himself to go. Not because he was physically prevented from leaving, but because he was becoming someone who didn't want to leave Vincent's perfect life behind. Vincent had loved this house, had felt fulfilled and purposeful living in it. And as Marcus absorbed more of Vincent's personality, he began to love it with the same intensity. The thought of abandoning Vincent's books, his collections, his life's work, became emotionally unbearable. Marcus discovered Vincent's final journal entries, which revealed that Vincent had been completely aware of the house's transformative effect. Vincent wrote, "I understand now that I am not the first Vincent to live in this house. Each generation, the house chooses someone from our family line to become its caretaker, and gradually transforms them into the person it needs them to be." The journal explained that the house preserved and accumulated the essence of each caretaker, layering personality upon personality across generations. Marcus wasn't just becoming Vincent. He was becoming all the previous owners who had been absorbed into the house's collective consciousness over more than a century. "The person I was before I inherited this house," Vincent had written, "was incomplete, unfulfilled, living a small and meaningless life. The house offered me the accumulated wisdom, experience, and purpose of all who came before. I chose to embrace the transformation rather than resist it." Marcus faced the same choice Vincent had made. He could fight the transformation and try to maintain his original identity, accepting a return to his previous life of financial struggle and purposelessness. Or he could surrender to the process and gain access to the accumulated wisdom, knowledge, and life experiences of generations of accomplished ancestors. The knowledge and capabilities he was gaining were intoxicating. Marcus could now perform complex mathematical calculations in his head, speak several languages fluently, and discuss philosophy, history, and science with the expertise of someone who had spent decades studying these subjects. Marcus chose to embrace the transformation completely. He reasoned that he wasn't losing his identity. He was evolving into a more complete version of himself, enhanced with the finest qualities and greatest achievements of his family lineage. The person he had been before was just a starting point, a rough draft that the house was helping him refine into something extraordinary. Over the following months, Marcus became Vincent in all but name. He resumed Vincent's medical practice, working as a consultant surgeon from the house. He spoke multiple languages fluently, could discuss historical events as if he had witnessed them personally, and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of art, literature, and science. Marcus felt brilliant, accomplished, and deeply satisfied with his life in ways he had never experienced before the transformation. He had purpose, expertise, and the profound satisfaction that comes from living a life of intellectual and professional achievement. But Marcus's friends and family noticed that he had become a completely different person. He spoke differently, carried himself with aristocratic bearing, had entirely different interests and values. They mourned the loss of the Marcus they had known, even though he insisted he was still himself, just improved and refined. Marcus began preparing the house for the next inheritance, just as Vincent had done before him. He updated Vincent's journals with his own experiences and memories, adding his original personality to the house's collective essence. He carefully maintained the collections, organized the books, and ensured that everything would be perfect for whoever would inherit the house after his death. Marcus wrote in his journal, "I understand now what Vincent meant about choosing evolution over resistance. The person I was at 28, struggling, purposeless, living a mediocre life, was incomplete. This house has given me access to the accumulated wisdom and achievements of extraordinary ancestors. I am not less myself. I am more myself than I ever could have been alone." When Marcus died at age 73, he left detailed instructions for the next family member who would inherit the house. The transformation process would continue, the house's collective consciousness would grow stronger, and another generation would face the choice between maintaining their limited original identity or embracing the accumulated greatness of their lineage. But here's the question that Marcus never fully answered in his journals, the question that haunts everyone who learns this story. If you could inherit the knowledge, wisdom, skills, and life experiences of your most accomplished ancestors, but lose your original personality in the process, would that be growth and evolution? Or would it be a form of death? Is the person who emerges from such a transformation still you, enhanced and improved? Or are you gone entirely, replaced by someone who carries your memories but embodies someone else's essential nature? And if you can't tell the difference, does it matter? Here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever inherited something from a family member, a piece of furniture, a piece of jewelry, a book collection, and found yourself drawn to interests or behaviors that weren't typical for you? Have you ever felt like you were becoming more like a deceased relative in ways that surprised you? If this story has made you question the nature of inheritance and identity, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychological horror that will make you examine your own life. But I'm warning you, tonight when you're surrounded by objects that belong to people who came before you, you might wonder what essence they carry and what they might be passing on to you. Because sometimes what we inherit from the dead isn't just their possessions, it's the person they needed us to become.